The house on Maple Street was too still that morning. The sound of a clock ticking in the living room echoed through the halls, blending with the faint hum of the refrigerator. Emily sat by the kitchen window, her cup of tea untouched, eyes staring at the drizzle outside. The garden looked tired, much like she felt. Her husband Mark had been gone for work again, another week. Another excuse. Emily had once believed that love could survive anything. Distance, stress, time. But lately, she wasn't sure anymore. Mark had changed. His calls were shorter, his laughter less frequent. He used to bring her flowers after every trip. Now he only brought silence. That morning, she wasn't alone. Upstairs, Daniel was unpacking his things. He was Mark's son from his first marriage, 22. Tall, quiet, with that same thoughtful look Mark once had in his youth. Daniel had just returned home from college for the summer. It had been months since Emily last saw him, and she was surprised by how much he had grown, not just taller, but more grounded, more aware of the world around him. She heard his footsteps and quickly straightened her back. When Daniel walked into the kitchen, his hair still damp from a shower, he gave her a polite smile. "Morning," he said, his voice calm and warm. "Good morning," Emily replied softly. "I made tea. Or coffee if you prefer." "Coffee's good," he said, sitting down across from her. As she poured it, she studied him briefly. His presence felt different now. Not as the awkward teenager she once tried to connect with, but as a young man. She reminded herself that he was just her stepson. Still, there was a strange comfort in having someone around again. Someone who filled the silence Mark had left behind. "So, how's school?" she asked, her tone light. "It's fine," he replied. "A lot of work. But I kind of like being busy." Emily smiled faintly. "That's good. Staying busy keeps the mind from wandering too much." Daniel nodded, but something in his eyes showed he understood what she meant. He looked at her, really looked, noticing how tired she seemed, how her smile carried a quiet sadness. She had always been kind to him, never trying to take his mother's place, but always making sure he felt welcome. They talked for a while, small things, harmless, polite. But beneath every exchange was a sense of shared loneliness. Two people trying to fill the emptiness that Mark's absence created. Later that day, Emily went to the backyard to water the plants. The air was warm and heavy after the rain, the soil still dark and soft. She wore an old white shirt and jeans, her hair tied back loosely. When Daniel came outside, she looked up, surprised. "I was going to fix the fence," he said, holding a toolbox. "Dad said it was falling apart." She smiled, grateful. "That would be wonderful. I've been meaning to do it, but I can't lift those panels alone." They worked side by side, and for the first time in weeks, the house felt alive. Daniel asked about the plants, and she told him how Mark had planted the roses years ago when they first bought the house. "He used to love gardening," she said quietly. "But now he barely steps outside." Daniel didn't say anything at first, then murmured, "Maybe he just forgot what makes him happy." Emily paused, looking at him. His words were simple, but hit deep. "Maybe," she said softly. They continued working, laughter occasionally breaking through the air. It felt easy, natural, something that had been missing for a long time. When the sun began to set, Emily brought out lemonade, and they sat on the porch. The golden light touched everything around them, the roses, the fence. Even her tired face seemed softer under it. "You know," Daniel said after a pause, "it's nice being home again. I didn't think it would feel this good." She smiled, her heart warming. "I'm glad you feel that way. I was worried you'd find it boring here." "Ta," he said. "It's peaceful." The way he said it made her glance at him. There was sincerity in his voice, something that made her chest tighten slightly. For a second, she forgot about the years, the distance, the titles. It was just two people enjoying a quiet sunset after a long day. That night, Emily cooked dinner. The sound of the knife on the cutting board filled the silence as Daniel helped her set the table. When they sat down, she noticed how comfortable it felt, how natural their conversation was. They spoke about college, movies, old family trips. Every laugh they shared seemed to erase a little bit of the distance between them. After dinner, As she was washing dishes, Daniel came to help again. "You don't have to," she said with a smile. "I know," he replied, "but it's better than just watching TV alone." That line lingered in her mind. Better than being alone. When everything was done, they sat again in the living room. The rain had started outside, tapping gently against the windows. The soft light of a lamp filled the space. Daniel leaned back on the couch, his voice quieter now. "Emily, can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said. "Are you okay?" The question caught her off guard. She tried to smile, but her eyes gave her away. "I'm fine," she said. "Just tired." He didn't push. He only said, "You don't seem fine." Something about his tone, gentle, sincere, made her throat tighten. It had been so long since someone asked her that and actually cared about the answer. She looked at him, trying to find words. "I think sometimes people get lost," she said finally. "They don't mean to. It just happens quietly." He nodded slowly. "I think I know what you mean." For a long moment, they just sat there listening to the rain. There was nothing inappropriate in the silence, just understanding. A quiet connection between two people who needed to feel seen. Later that night, after Daniel went to bed, Emily stood by the window in her room, staring at the rain. She thought about Mark, how distant he had become, how she had tried to reach him, but always ended up feeling smaller. And then she thought about Daniel, how easily he had listened. How simple it was to talk to him without feeling judged. It scared her a little, that comfort. But it also reminded her she was still human, capable of warmth, laughter, connection. Things she'd almost forgotten. The next morning, Daniel came down early. Emily was already awake, wearing her robe, hair loosely tied. She was making pancakes, something she hadn't done in months. "You're up early," he said, smiling. "Couldn't sleep," she replied. "Figured I'd make breakfast." They ate together, and as they did, she asked, "Would you help me clean the attic later? There's a lot of old stuff up there that needs sorting. Mark keeps saying he'll do it, but he never does." Daniel finished, smiling. She laughed. "Exactly," he agreed without hesitation. "Sure, let's do it." The rest of the day passed quietly, but both of them felt something unspoken waiting, not tension. Not anything wrong, just a strange sense that something important was coming. A moment that would change how they saw each other forever. When Emily looked at Daniel that afternoon, she didn't see the boy who used to visit on weekends. She saw someone who noticed her pain without her saying a word. Someone who made the house feel alive again. And when Daniel looked at her, he didn't see his father's wife. He saw a woman who had been strong for too long, who needed someone to simply understand her. Neither of them said it aloud. But both knew something had shifted. The attic would be where everything changed. The next morning began quietly. A soft light slipped through the curtains as Emily moved through the house with a strange mix of nervousness and excitement. She hadn't felt this awake in months. The idea of cleaning the attic wasn't what thrilled her. It was the thought of company, of sharing a small project with someone who actually wanted to be there. Daniel showed up at the kitchen doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee. "I made you one," he said. Emily smiled, genuinely surprised. "You made coffee for me?" "Yeah," he said with a shrug. "You made breakfast yesterday." "Fair trade." She took the mug, feeling a little warmth in her chest. It was a small thing, but small things meant a lot these days. They finished their drinks quickly and headed upstairs. The attic door creaked open after years of being ignored. Dust floated in the sunlight that streamed through the single small window. The air smelled like old wood and forgotten memories. Cardboard boxes lined the walls, filled with everything from photo albums to winter coats. "Wow," Daniel said, looking around. "This is like stepping into another time." Emily laughed softly. "That's because no one's been brave enough to come up here since we moved in." He looked back at her. "Well, today's the day." They started sorting through boxes, working in silence at first. Emily found a box full of Mark's old things, travel souvenirs, pictures from business trips, gifts he'd brought her years ago. Her hands lingered on a small framed photo of them on their honeymoon. She smiled faintly, then set it aside. Daniel noticed the quiet change in her face. "You okay?" She nodded, just remembering. He didn't ask more, but his silence was gentle. He kept organizing things, giving her space to feel what she needed to feel. After a while, Emily found an old stereo and plugged it in. To her surprise, it still worked. A soft song from the early 2000s filled the attic, slow, melodic, nostalgic. She looked at Daniel with a playful grin. Guess this place needed some music. He smiled back. You know what? It's not bad up here now. They worked for hours, talking and laughing. Emily told him stories from when she and Mark had first met, how nervous she had been, how full of dreams they both were. Daniel listened carefully, sometimes smiling, sometimes looking thoughtful. You must have loved him a lot, he said quietly. I did, she replied, and I still do in a way. But love changes. Sometimes it fades quietly, not because you want it to, but because both people stop trying. Daniel was silent for a moment. I think I get that. There was something honest in his voice that caught her attention. She glanced at him. Have you ever loved someone like that? He hesitated. Almost, but I think it was just timing. Some people come into your life when you're not ready for them. Emily nodded. And sometimes they leave when you need them the most. For a few seconds, their eyes met. Not romantically, not inappropriately, but deeply human. It was the look of two people who had both been let down by time and circumstance. Then Emily looked away, taking a breath. Let's keep going, she said softly. They found an old box full of family photos. Daniel as a little boy, Mark's first wife smiling beside him. Emily held up one of the pictures. You were adorable, she said. Daniel laughed. Yeah, before I discovered fast food and bad haircuts. She chuckled, shaking her head. You still have that same look, though. Kind eyes. He smiled, a little embarrassed. Thanks. Hours passed, and by late afternoon, the attic looked almost new. The air felt lighter. Emily wiped the dust off her hands, looking around. We actually did it. Daniel grinned. Teamwork. She nodded. You have no idea how much this means to me, Daniel. I've been trying to do this for years, but I could never bring myself to. Why not? He asked. She hesitated. Because everything here reminded me of what I lost, of how quiet the house became. Daniel stepped closer. Not too close, but enough for his voice to sound sincere. Maybe it's not too late to bring some of that life back. Emily looked at him, her throat tight. You sound like someone twice your age. He laughed softly. Maybe college makes you think too much. She smiled, then turned toward the window. The rain had stopped and sunlight streamed through, painting the room in gold. You know, she said, I've been thinking of repainting this attic, turning it into something useful. Maybe a reading space or an art room. Daniel nodded. That's a great idea. You should do it. She looked at him for a moment, then said quietly, then promise me something. What's that? Promise you'll help me finish it before you go back to school. Daniel's eyes softened. I promise. Something about that promise felt heavier than it should have. Not romantic, but meaningful. Like two people quietly rebuilding something together that the world had forgotten. They packed the last few boxes and went downstairs. Emily made them sandwiches, and they sat at the kitchen table, exhausted but happy. The kind of happiness that came from simple things. Teamwork, laughter, feeling seen, double quotes Emily. Daniel said after a while, you're different than I remember. She tilted her head. Different how? You seem lighter, like you're finally breathing again. She smiled faintly. Maybe I am. Maybe cleaning that attic was exactly what I needed. There was a comfortable pause before she added, Thank you for being here, Daniel. Really. This house feels less empty when you're around. He smiled. I'm glad. I like being here. That night, when she was alone in her room, Emily thought about that day, the laughter, the easy way they talked, the promise they made. It wasn't wrong. It wasn't about attraction. It was about two lonely people finding hope again in a house that had forgotten joy. She walked to her dresser and found an old photo of Mark. She looked at it for a long time. "I wish you'd come home," she whispered. "You're missing everything." The next morning, the sky was clear. Daniel found her in the backyard, kneeling by the flower bed. "You're at it again," he said with a smile. "I'm making up for lost time," she replied, brushing her hands on her jeans. "These poor flowers have been ignored long enough." He crouched down beside her. "Need help?" She smiled. "I'd like that." As they worked, she found herself laughing again, not the forced kind she used around Mark, but a real, full laugh. It surprised her. When they finished, she looked around proudly. "Not bad for a morning's work." Daniel nodded. "You should show Dad. He'd be impressed." Her smile faded slightly. "Maybe, but I'm not sure he'd notice anymore." Daniel looked at her, his voice gentle. "Then I'll notice for him." The words made her heart ache, not because they were wrong, but because they were kind. Two kind dots she stood, brushing off her jeans. "Come on," she said softly. "Let's paint that attic before the day's gone." And they did. The laughter continued, the paint spilled, the air smelled of fresh color and new beginnings. The walls went from gray to light cream, and the attic slowly turned into something beautiful. When they were done, Emily stood back, her eyes shining. "It's perfect." Daniel smiled, wiping his hands. "We make a good team." For a long moment, they both stood there, looking around the room, a space that had once been forgotten but now glowed with light. Emily turned to him and said quietly, "You helped me remember something I thought I'd lost." "What's that?" He asked, how to feel alive again. Daniel didn't know what to say. He just smiled softly, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The sunlight, the scent of paint, the quiet heartbeat of the house, it all seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the world moved on. But inside that attic, something had changed. Something gentle. Something good. Summer drifted quietly into its final days. The attic, once dark and forgotten, looked alive. Sunlight poured in through the window, falling across the cream-colored walls and the shelves Daniel had built with his own hands. Emily stood there one morning, holding a small mug of coffee, taking in the calmness. It was the first time in years that her house felt like home again. Downstairs, Daniel was packing a few boxes. His summer break was ending. College awaited. The thought made Emily's heart tighten. She had grown used to his presence, his calm energy, his kindness. The easy laughter that filled rooms once ruled by silence. She found him in the living room, folding a few clothes. "You're leaving tomorrow?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Yeah, early morning. I've got to move into my apartment before classes start." She tried to smile, but her voice came out soft. "It's going to feel strange here without you." He looked up. "It's going to feel strange for me too. I've gotten used to this place. Used to being here." The air between them felt heavier than before. Not wrong, just full of emotions neither of them knew how to name. "Before you go," Emily said, "I want to show you something." She led him up to the attic. It smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee. On the far side of the room stood a small wooden box. She opened it and took out a framed picture, one of the two of them, laughing during the painting day, both covered in white paint. Daniel smiled as soon as he saw it. "You kept that?" he asked. "Of course," she said. "That day meant something to me. It reminded me that not everything in this house had to be tied to sadness." He looked at her for a moment, then said quietly, "You're stronger than you think, Emily." She let out a small laugh. "I don't feel that way most days." "Still," he said, "you are." There was silence again, comfortable, but filled with all the things they would never say. Later that afternoon, Mark called. His voice on the other end of the phone was distant, distracted. Emily listened to him talk about meetings and flights and deadlines. But all she could think about was how far away he sounded, even though the phone line was clear. "When will you be home?" she asked. "Maybe next weekend," he replied quickly. "Things are busy right now." She wanted to tell him she missed him, that their house didn't feel like a home without him, but she didn't. She just said, "Okay," and hung up. That Daniel walked in just as she ended the call. He could see the disappointment in her face, but he didn't ask. Instead, he said softly, "Want to take a walk?" She hesitated, then nodded. They walked through the neighborhood park. The air was warm, the trees glowing gold under the late afternoon sun. Families laughed in the distance, children ran by, and for a while, Emily felt lighter. As they sat on a bench near the pond, Daniel broke the silence. "Do you ever think about starting over?" She looked at him, puzzled. "Starting over?" "Yeah, like moving somewhere new. Doing something that's just yours." Emily sighed. "Sometimes. But it's hard. This house, this life, it all feels like a story I didn't finish. I keep waiting for the next chapter. But Mark? He's living another one." Daniel nodded slowly. "You deserve more than waiting." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. She turned to him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. "You remind me of what I used to believe in," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "What's that?" "That kindness can change things." They walked home quietly after that, both lost in thought. The day ended with dinner, simple, warm, peaceful. Emily tried to memorize it. The sound of Daniel's laughter, the way he thanked her for the meal. The calm rhythm of a house that finally felt alive again. When night came, Emily couldn't sleep. She went up to the attic one last time. The moonlight spilled through the window, painting the floor in silver. She sat down on the couch they had moved up there and thought about everything that had happened that summer. The garden. The laughter. The quiet moments that had made her feel seen again. She realized something. It wasn't just Daniel's presence that had changed her. It was the reminder that she was still capable of connection, of joy, of rebuilding what life had broken. The next morning, Daniel's car was already loaded when she came outside. He turned when he saw her, smiling softly. "You didn't think you'd sneak out without saying goodbye, did you?" she said with a faint laugh. "Never," he replied. She handed him a small envelope. "Don't open it until you get to campus." He looked at it curiously, but nodded. "Deal." Then she took a deep breath and said, "Daniel, thank you for everything. You've done more for this house and for me than you realize." He shook his head. "You helped me too, Emily. You reminded me what family feels like. Not perfect, not easy, just real." For a long moment, they stood there in silence. Then, with a quiet smile, Daniel hugged her. It wasn't a long hug, but it said everything words couldn't. When he pulled away, she could see that his eyes were a little wet, hers too, as his car drove away. Emily stood in the driveway, watching until the sound of the engine disappeared. The house behind her was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet this time. Not empty, not lonely, just peaceful. Inside, she went to the attic. The framed picture of her and Daniel sat on the shelf, next to the old photo of her and Mark. For the first time, she didn't feel torn between them. Both moments, past and present, were parts of her story. She sat down at the small desk Daniel had built for her and opened her journal. Then she began to write. August 25th. The summer changed me. Not because of something big, but because of someone who reminded me that small kindness can heal what time tried to break. For so long, I blamed Mark's distance for my unhappiness. But maybe I forgot to notice the parts of life still reaching out to me. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. I want to start again. For me, days turned into weeks. Emily started repainting other rooms in the house, tending to the garden more, reconnecting with friends she hadn't seen in years. Mark finally came home one weekend, tired and distracted. He noticed the changes immediately. The house looked brighter, the garden alive again, and Emily seemed calmer. "You've been busy," he said. She smiled. "Just taking care of what matters." He looked at her for a long moment. Something in her confidence made him pause. "I missed this," he said quietly. Emily didn't respond right away. She simply nodded. "Then maybe we can start over. Slowly." Wasn't a promise, but it was something, a beginning. Fragile, but real. That evening, when she was alone again, she sat by the attic window and looked out at the sunset. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Got to campus safely. Opened your letter. Thank you for everything, Emily. I'll keep my promise. Don't stop painting that attic. You made it beautiful." She smiled, her heart full. In her letter, she had written something simple. "You help me remember that life doesn't end when love changes, it just finds new forms." Emily looked around the attic, the soft colors, the books on the shelf, the framed photo of laughter. It wasn't just a room anymore. It was proof that healing was possible. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees. Inside, Emily whispered to herself, "This isn't the end. It's just the start of a better chapter." And somewhere far away, Daniel probably thought the same.